Hey guys, tonight we slip into a foggy myth, the kind where wine flows from nowhere, pirates regret their career choices, and gods wear floppy hats just to be dramatic. You're on the deck of a ship somewhere off the coast of ancient Greece. The waves are warm, the sky is too blue, and the air hums with a kind of mischievous calm, like something is definitely about to go wrong, but no one has noticed yet. Dionysus, god of wine and questionable decisions, is standing barefoot in the sun. He's humming. That's never a good sign. You're not here to battle monsters or scale Mount Olympus. Nope. You're just following a story so bizarre, so low stakes, and beautifully strange, it feels like a dream you almost remember. And you probably won't survive this. Not because of danger, but because your pillow is about to win this fight. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk through the haze of ancient legend, arriving just in time to meet a god you might have underestimated. Dionysus doesn't ride chariots or hurl lightning bolts. He doesn't demand temples carved in marble. He shows up late, barefoot, usually holding a cup, and he ruins lives very, very gently. He wasn't supposed to be born at all, actually. Zeus, yes, that Zeus, had an affair, shocking we know, with a mortal woman named Semele. Naturally, Hera, queen of the gods and full-time grudge holder, was not thrilled, so she tricked Semele into asking Zeus to reveal his true divine form. Classic rookie mistake. Mortals can't handle that kind of radiance. Semele got incinerated instantly. Bright light, poof, ash pile. But Zeus, being the ever-resourceful deity, snatched the unborn baby Dionysus from the flames and, brace yourself, sewed him into his thigh. That's right, thigh. 9 months later, out popped a fully cooked baby god from a celestial dad leg, which, if you're keeping track, makes Dionysus the only Olympian born twice. The Greeks called him the twice-born. Very mystical, very strange, very thigh-based. Historians still argue whether this whole thigh birth story was symbolic of rebirth rituals or just an ancient way of saying, let's make this myth weirder. But it set the tone. Dionysus was never going to be normal. He was a god of opposites, divine and human, joyful and terrifying, present and distant. He was the god who could make you laugh uncontrollably one minute, then turn your face into ivy the next. You know, classic party energy. His domain wasn't cities or battlefields, it was the edges, the forests, the vineyards, the places where you're just sober enough to have deep thoughts, but just drunk enough not to remember them later. And his power? Not muscle, not violence, just wine, mood, frenzy, the slow unraveling of whatever holds you together. You picture him walking into a village, the air suddenly sweet with the smell of crushed grapes and wood smoke. The cows stop mooing, the dogs sit down. A flute plays somewhere, even though no one's holding one. People blink slowly and ask, why are there vines on the statue's head? Dionysus doesn't answer. He just smiles, pours a cup, and waits. Quirky tidbit? He almost always travels with a crew that would get kicked out of every respectable inn. Drunk satyrs, those goat-legged chaos goblins, wild-haired maenads, mortal women who abandon home and hearth to join his forest raves, and the occasional leopard. Yes, leopard. That's not a metaphor. Just a literal big cat on a leash licking wine off its whiskers. And somehow, he's still the calmest one in the group. But let's rewind. Before he could throw vineyard orgies or transform sailors into dolphins, we'll get there, Dionysus had to survive a childhood that felt more like a witness protection program. Hera, still fuming from the whole incinerated mistress situation, was hunting him. Even as a baby, So Zeus handed the infant off to Hermes, the god of travel, speed, and multitasking. Hermes, who probably sighed loudly at the task, whisked baby Dionysus away to hide him in various nooks and crannies across the Greek world. One of the stranger hiding spots, a remote cave with goat nymphs who nursed him with honey and taught him how to bleat convincingly. You can almost imagine little Dionysus crawling through ivy, gurgling with baby joy while Hermes explains to a bunch of woodland creatures, just act natural, she might be watching. Even as a child, Dionysus didn't quite fit. He giggled at things that made mortals nervous. He picked grapes before they were ripe. He once made an amphora overflow for no reason other than it looked boring. And everywhere he went, people started acting off, dreamy, drowsy, distracted, like they were halfway between a nap and a folk song. That's the thing about Dionysus. He wasn't about discipline or duty. He didn't build cities or hand down laws. He reminded people how to let go, how to loosen the tight grip of civilization just enough to feel free. But there was always a catch. Too much freedom, and the line between joy and madness got blurry. Really blurry. And now, as you walk beside him through myth, feeling the soft squish of grape skins underfoot and the heavy scent of wisteria in the air, you start to realize this God doesn't demand fear or worship. He just asks that you surrender, even if it's only for the night. You're somewhere near the sea now. The trees thin out. You feel the breeze get saltier. There's laughter ahead, drunken, rolling, like someone just made a joke that wasn't actually funny, but the wine made it brilliant. Dionysus, still barefoot, steps into a small coastal town you've never heard of and won't remember. That's how it usually goes with him. Places blur when he passes through. This town is sleepy in the way only port towns are in late afternoon, nets drying on poles, fish guts attracting lazy cats, a donkey braying like it's trying to outsing the seagulls. Dionysus wanders in wearing a cloak too fine for a commoner, too dusty for a noble, and too purple for anyone not trying to start trouble. He isn't really hiding who he is. He never does. But he isn't exactly declaring it either. Just walking along the shore, humming that tune again. That strange melody that sounds like a lullaby from a forgotten forest. Enter the pirates. They're not particularly smart pirates. You can tell that instantly. Their ship has peeling paint, one sail patched with what looks like a toga, and a figurehead that used to be a lion, but now looks suspiciously like a potato. These guys aren't terrifying sea wolves. They're more like seagulls in hats, but they're opportunistic. And when they see Dionysus alone, unarmed, wearing a robe worth more than their entire ship, they perk up like raccoons spotting a dropped sandwich. Looks rich, one mutters, probably soft. Historians still argue whether this myth was rooted in actual stories of God impersonators getting nabbed by slavers, or if it was just a divine prank tale meant to warn folks about messing with strangers. Either way, you know what's coming. They offer him passage, smiles too wide, voices too sweet. "Oh, sir, where you headed? We'll take you anywhere." Dionysus smiles gently. Anywhere sounds good. He boards without protest, settles near the mast, closes his eyes. They cast off. Now you'd expect a god, especially one with a flair for theater, to strike immediately, to summon waves, sprout vines from the deck, and shout something like, "Fools, you dare kidnap a deity?" But Dionysus is a slow burn kind of god. He lets them gloat first. They tie him up, not tightly. They argue over how much he'll fetch. Some think he's royal. One insists he's probably just a very confident merchant. Another suggests maybe he's an actor. Look at his hair. That's when things shift. The ropes fall off him. He didn't move, didn't flinch. Just the ropes uncoil like bored snakes. One pirate blinks. Did you see that? Another waves it off. Just the tide rocking us. Then the ship groans. Not in a we're sinking way, more like it's stretching. Wood creaks like it's waking from a nap. The mast starts to bloom. Actual leaves. The sail, now covered in vines. Grapes sprout midair, hanging heavy from the rigging. The rudder sprouts ivy. That's usually the moment when someone says, "Wait, what's happening?" A panther appears, just casually, sitting near the stern, cleaning its paws like it's bored. No one saw it come aboard. There was no splash, no ladder. It's just there now, watching. Dionysus is still humming. One pirate finally snaps, tries to grab a weapon, but the handle has turned into bark. Another tries to jump overboard, but the sea is writhing, the water's alive. Not angry, just playful, but definitely in control. Fish jump unnaturally high, sea foam hisses like it's giggling, and then it happens. One by one, the pirates begin to change. Not all at once, not painfully, just slowly, gently, confusingly. Their feet curl, their arms tighten, skin slicks over with a shimmer of silver blue. Tails appear. Not terrifying sea serpent tails, sleek dolphin ones. You're watching confused men yelp as their faces stretch into snouts and their hands become fins. One tries to scream, but it comes out a squeak, a dolphin squeak. And here's the weird part. They don't sink. They start to swim, playfully, like they've forgotten what just happened. Quirky tidbit, in some versions of the myth, Dionysus doesn't do this out of revenge. He gives them a kind of mercy. Dolphins, after all, were beloved by Greeks, seen as lucky, sacred even. He didn't destroy them, he gave them a different kind of freedom. You're standing now at the edge of the ship, watching dolphins leap through the surf and wondering, did they get off easy? Dionysus steps beside you, still humming. He's smiling, but there's something ancient in his eyes now, not wine and giggles anymore. Something deeper, like a river under the vineyard. You feel a sudden understanding, not fear, not awe, just a quiet truth. Gods don't always punish with fire. Sometimes they transform, not to hurt, but to teach, or maybe just to keep the story interesting. And then the ship is gone, no wreckage, no splash, just you on a beach holding a grape that wasn't there before. The wind carries the scent of salt and ferment. You hear laughter, distant but fading. Dionysus is already walking away. The beach stretches wide now. The last vines of Dionysus' passing curling back into the sand like they were never there. You feel the sun warming your shoulders and the gentle sting of salt on your lips. Around you, the coastal air carries the echo of transformation. Soft dolphin clicks out beyond the rocks, as if they're still trying to remember how legs used to feel. Dionysus doesn't look back. That's the thing with gods who know their own mythology. They don't linger in endings. You follow, of course. What else is there to do? You brush sand from your knees and start up the narrow path carved into the cliffs, the kind only goats or madmen or wine-soaked divinities would use. As you climb, the sea falls away behind you, replaced by rustling olive trees, sun-baked terracotta, and the faint trill of cicadas. By the time you catch up, Dionysus is reclining in a glade, one leg draped over the other, sipping something from a clay cup that keeps refilling itself when he isn't looking. A satyr lounges nearby, gnawing on a fig, his eyes half-lidded like a man halfway into a dream. This is where the story should slow down. But no, not with Dionysus, not ever. See, there's this king, Pentheus of Thebes, very serious, very proper, a man who probably irons his togas and labels his sandals. And Pentheus? He is not a fan of Dionysus. Mainstream fact: in ancient Greek cities, Dionysus festivals, like the Bacchanalia, were raucous, free-spirited affairs where the usual rules got tossed like confetti. Think drama contests, dancing in ivy crowns, and plenty of wine. But in Thebes, the old guard didn't want all that noise. So Pentheus hears tales of wild women in the hills, of citizens abandoning their homes to worship a new god in secret groves, of songs at midnight, of people becoming animals, of masks and madness and wine. Naturally, he is scandalized. Improper, he likely shouted at a passing olive tree. Decadent, he might have muttered to his sandals. And so he does what all overconfident rulers and myths do. He declares Dionysus a fraud. Now here's where things get juicy. Dionysus doesn't storm Thebes with lightning. He doesn't turn the king into a goat or make the city walls bleed. Instead, he disguises himself. Young, pretty, golden curls, soft voice. The kind of beauty that's hard to pin down, boyish one moment, terrifyingly divine the next. He lets himself be arrested. Pentheus thinks he's won, locks up this stranger and feels very proud of himself. Probably pours himself a cup of water and nods sternly at his reflection. But here's the fringe tidbit. When Dionysus is imprisoned, the shackles won't hold. The doors swing open. The walls breathe ivy. Some stories say the earth literally trembles, others that the palace servants start dancing for no reason. Either way, Dionysus strolls out, but he doesn't leave. No, instead he plays his best card yet. He whispers to Pentheus. Just suggestions, really. Harmless thoughts. Wouldn't you like to see what your people are doing up there in the hills? Wouldn't it be wise as a ruler to investigate? Just to know. Pentheus hesitates, but pride's a heavy thing, so he says yes. But Dionysus insists if you're going to spy on wild worshippers, you'll need a disguise. So Pentheus ends up in a dress. Yes, really. A full-flowing robe, veil, and all. Historians still argue whether this cross-dressing was intended as divine mockery, a commentary on gender fluidity, or just an ancient comedic gag. Maybe it's all three. Myths aren't shy like that. Now picture it. You standing beside Dionysus on a hill, watching this extremely serious king teeter in sandals through the underbrush. The god is smiling faintly, holding back laughter as Pentheus stumbles on roots and clutches at tree trunks, trying to spy on the maenads, those wild women in trance, dancing for Dionysus. And here's the thing about myths. They rarely end well for those who don't respect the divine. The maenads see Pentheus, but they don't see a king. They see prey. Maybe they think he's a lion, or a spy, or a man trying to contain something uncontainable. Their eyes are wild with holy madness. They rush him. You turn your head. The myths are vague on the details, whether he pleads, whether he screams, whether for 1 second he understands who he's dealing with. All we know is that Dionysus watches, calm, a god of celebration, yes, but also of punishment, a duality in grapevines. And Pentheus, torn apart. The final blow comes from his own mother, Agave, who in her frenzy believes he's a beast. Only later does she realize what she's done. And Dionysus, he simply walks away. There's a quiet to the woods now, a sobering hush. You notice how quickly the laughter fades when the lesson lands. Not all madness is joy. Not all ecstasy is safe. You pluck a fig from the tree and chew it slowly, its sweetness clinging to your tongue like guilt. You realize this. Dionysus is not just a party god. He's balance. For every dance, there's a fall. For every sip, a hangover. And still, you follow. By the time you descend from the wooded hills of Thebes, the world feels a little different. The sun is lower now, casting long shadows that stretch like lazy cats across the stones. Your feet are sore, and there's grape juice sticky on your palm, though you can't remember when you last touched a grape. Dionysus doesn't seem tired. He hums something tuneless, a half-forgotten melody that seems older than language. The road curves gently, lined with poplars, whose leaves flicker like bronze coins in the breeze. Ahead lies another city, another tale. But not just yet. You rest beside a stone fountain, its basin carved with half-worn nymphs. Water trickles lazily, and for a moment, it's quiet. You glance at Dionysus, who's letting the droplets fall into his open palm, watching them scatter. And then, as if on cue, he grins. "Let's talk about my childhood," he says, as if you'd asked. You didn't. You were honestly thinking about olives. But okay, childhood. Now you think a god like Dionysus would have a serene upbringing, right? Wine, music, loving parents, gentle sunsets. But no, this is Greek myth. No one gets a normal childhood. Dionysus was born of fire. Well, technically he was born twice, which is already a red flag. See, his mother Semele was a mortal, and his father, Zeus, big guy, lightning enthusiast, habitual cheater. Semele, poor thing, gets pregnant, and then Hera, Zeus's wife and the original queen of spite, finds out. Quirky tidbit, Hera doesn't just throw a tantrum. She disguises herself as an old woman, befriends Semele, and sows doubt. If Zeus really loves you, she whispers, ask him to show you his true form. So Semele, young and trusting, asks Zeus, and Zeus, probably rubbing his temples and muttering, "Not again," agrees. He reveals himself in full divine glory. Semele, mortal as a fig tart, is instantly incinerated. But here's the twist. She's already 6 months pregnant. Zeus, in a rare moment of parental action, snatches the unborn Dionysus from the flames and sews him into his own thigh. Yes, thigh. Historians still argue whether this bizarre womb substitute was meant to symbolize divine protection, masculine fertility, or simply give future scholars a migraine. But 3 months later, Dionysus is born again, this time from Zeus's leg. So now you've got a twice-born god. That's actually what his name means, twice-born, or twice-born of Zeus. Scholars debate the etymology like it's a drinking game, but the point stands. And after that, well, you can't just raise a divine baby in the open. Hera's still furious. So Zeus hands the newborn off, depending on the version, to Hermes, to mountain nymphs, or even to his mortal aunt Ino and her husband Athamas. And no matter where he ends up, things go badly. Ino's household is soon cursed with madness. Athamas starts hallucinating, thinking his wife and kids are deer. He literally hunts them through the halls. The baby, meanwhile, is hidden in a cave, wrapped in ivy and fed honey by wild bees. It's basically the divine equivalent of being homeschooled by wolves. Later stories say Dionysus wandered, changing caretakers constantly. Raised by rain spirits in Nysa, tutored by Soninus the drunken satyr, protected by shape-shifting nymphs who disguised him as a girl to avoid Hera's wrath. There's even a version where Dionysus is turned into a goat, just for safety. And that's the weird thing. He's always fleeing. For a god, he's got a lot of flight instinct, but it shapes him. By the time he grows up, he's not just a party boy. He's a survivor, a wanderer, a misfit god who never truly fits in with Olympus. He walks the edges between wild and tame, joy and chaos, man and woman. That's why he understands humans better than most gods. He's lived like one, lost, hunted, raised by strangers, disguised, misunderstood. And when he finally comes into his power, it isn't with thunderbolts. It's with ivy and rhythm and a kind of joy that looks suspiciously like rebellion. You tilt your head, watching Dionysus sip again from his self-filling cup. He catches your gaze and shrugs. Everyone's got trauma, he says, like he's quoting an oracle. Then he stands, suddenly restless. Let's walk, he says, as if the past is something you can shake off like dust from a hymn. You leave the fountain and follow him down the road, which seems to shimmer in the afternoon heat. And you think, no wonder he turned pirates into dolphins. No wonder he makes kings wear dresses. He's never forgotten what it feels like to be vulnerable, underestimated, hunted. And now he makes the rules. You pass a shepherd and his flock. The shepherd nods. His sheep look mildly scandalized by your companion's leopard skin sash and the trail of thyrsus leaves he's shedding like breadcrumbs. In the distance, you hear drums, faint, like someone's heart learning to beat for the first time. You know the rhythm by now. You keep walking. The road narrows now, curling like a vine along the rocky coast. Dionysus hums something again, more tuneful this time. It sounds vaguely familiar, like a song your grandmother might hum while peeling fruit with a knife too sharp for comfort. He stops at a ridge and gestures to the sea below. Here, he says, with a grin that says nothing and everything at once, is where I once had a very bad boat ride. And just like that, you know, you're getting the dolphin story. There's no plaque, no statue, no commemorative mural, just open sky, jagged cliffs, and blue waves stretched so wide they seem to forget where they end. But Dionysus remembers. You sit on a smooth rock as the god settles beside you. The wind smells of salt and thyme. He digs his fingers into the dirt as if pulling the memory out. So, he begins, there were these pirates. Mainstream fact. Piracy was a very real problem in the ancient Mediterranean. While modern pirates might have speedboats and machine guns, ancient ones had sleek wooden ships, sharp daggers, and absolutely no patience for moral complexity. They attacked coastal towns, looted temples, and kidnapped anyone who looked remotely ransom-worthy. And Dionysus? Well, to them, he looked like an ordinary rich boy. That's the thing about him. He doesn't always look like a god. Sometimes he shows up as a drowsy traveler, curls tousled, eyes half closed, shirt slightly off kilter. Other times he looks like he's halfway through a really good dream. On this particular day, he'd taken the form of a young man in a purple cloak, just standing on the shore like a lost noble. The pirates understandably took one look and thought, jackpot. They grabbed him, tied him up, loosely mind you, and threw him on board. They laughed, slapped each other on the back, already imagining the ransom. One pirate joked about cutting off a finger for proof. Another checked his own teeth in a polished shield. Dionysus said nothing. He just sat there, humming, smiling faintly. You glance sideways at him now. His smile hasn't changed in millennia. Back on the ship, the helmsman, an older, salt-stained sailor, started to sweat. Something felt off. The wind stilled. The ropes coiled like snakes. The wood beneath his sandals began to creak, like it didn't approve of what was happening. He begged the others, let's let him go. He's no mortal. Look at his eyes. That's the gaze of Olympus, not of some provincial brat. But pirates don't listen, especially not to helmsmen. So the ship pushed off. Then the fun began. First, the wine. Sweet, sticky wine began to flood the deck, pouring from the mast, bubbling up from the planks. The pirates slipped, cursed, tried to bail it out with their helmets. Useless. The wine soaked everything, their clothes, their boots, their dignity. Then came the vines. Ivy and grapevines erupted from the sails and oars, twisting around the mast, curling through the rigging. Leaves unfolded like they were waking from a nap. Grapes ripened instantly, bursting juice down their ropes. Then came the animals. A lion appeared at the prow. Not a polite, caged lion. A divine lion, majestic, glowing slightly, yawning as if mildly inconvenienced. A bear joined him. The pirates screamed. They tripped over barrels and flung themselves overboard, except they didn't hit the water as men. No, as they fell, their bodies twisted, shimmered, collapsed inward. Flippers. Smooth gray skin, beady black eyes blinking in surprise. They splashed into the sea as dolphins, and the only one spared? The helmsman, the one who'd seen the truth. Dionysus let him live, gave him a quiet beach and a full wine jug. Not as a reward, really, just as a reminder. Listen when your gut says, run from the guy humming to himself while tied up. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Greeks believed dolphins were sacred animals, beloved of Apollo and Dionysus alike. Killing one was considered a capital offense. There were even myths that dolphins carried the souls of the dead across the waves, divine Uber, if you will. Historians still argue whether this myth of dolphin transformation served as a parable about divine mercy, a warning against greed, or just an oddly aquatic revenge fantasy. But here's the part no one really talks about. Dionysus didn't punish the pirates out of rage. He did it out of disappointment. They could have danced with him, shared wine, heard music that could break your heart. But instead, they chose chains. You look at him now, still smiling at the sea. Somewhere far off, a dolphin arcs above the waves, then vanishes again. You think, maybe they're still out there. Maybe they still follow his ship, long after they forgot why. People underestimate joy, Dionysus says softly, almost to himself. They think it's weakness, but it's power, the deepest kind. The wind shifts, and in that moment you wonder, not for the first time, if there's ever been a god more human than this one. You rise from the rock and brush the dust from your palms. Dionysus has already started walking again, down a sloping path that winds away from the sea and into the sun-drenched hills. You follow, steps crunching softly over pebbles, trying to imagine what it would be like to live a life where vines obey your thoughts and wine spills from thin air. He pauses near an olive tree, stretches lazily, and says, "You know, I wasn't always welcome in Olympus." Of course he wasn't. Too wild, too unpredictable. The gods like their hierarchy neat, columns of polished marble and clear familial lines. Dionysus didn't fit into their filing system. He showed up late. His birth was complicated. His followers were loud, and he didn't exactly scream order. Mainstream fact, Dionysus was the last god to be admitted to the Olympian pantheon. His inclusion ruffled more than a few divine feathers. Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, is said to have stepped down to make room for him. Imagine being the calm, cozy goddess of domestic peace and making way for the god of ecstatic chaos. That's like trading a cup of chamomile tea for a triple espresso spiked with glitter. The story of his birth doesn't help. You walk a little slower, soaking in the tale. His mother, Semele, was mortal, a princess of Thebes. Zeus, king of the gods and professional philanderer, fell for her. Classic setup. But when Hera, Zeus's wife, found out, she did what any jealous goddess might do, disguised herself as an old woman and planted a seed of doubt in Semele's mind. If Zeus really is who he says, Hera suggested, shouldn't he prove it? Semele, young and in love, agreed. She made Zeus promise on the river Styx to reveal his true form. That's like asking someone to prove their affection by detonating a nuclear bomb in your living room. Zeus begged her not to, but an oath on the Styx is unbreakable, so he did it. He showed her his divine self, his full, searing power, lightning, thunder, the raw, roaring majesty of Olympus, and she burned instantly. But not before Zeus, in a moment of desperate instinct, reached through the flames and snatched their unborn child from her womb. He stitched the baby into his own thigh, don't ask, and carried him there until he was ready to be born again. Quirky tidbit. Dionysus is sometimes called the twice born for this reason. First from Semele, then from Zeus. It's not just mythic poetry, it became a symbol, rebirth, transformation, a god who knows death and life equally well. You glance over and catch Dionysus watching you. Being born hurts, he says simply, even the second time. You wonder what it must have been like, growing inside thunder, being carried not in a womb but in the flesh of a god, and then to be born again into a world that didn't quite know what to do with you. He shrugs. They tried to hide me, thought I'd be safer that way. The tale continues. After his second birth, baby Dionysus was hidden from Hera's wrath. Zeus handed him over to Hermes, who delivered him to a distant land where he'd be raised in secrecy. Some say it was Nysa, a mythical mountain paradise. Others say it was tucked away in India or Arabia, far from Olympus's gossip and grudges. Historians still argue whether Nysa was a real place, a poetic symbol, or just a clever name for somewhere far enough away that no one would ask questions. Wherever it was, he was raised by nymphs, spirits of the wild. They taught him songs older than temples. They let him play in meadows and speak to animals. He learned the rhythm's nature, not the stiff rituals of Olympus. He grew into himself, and when he was ready, he came back, but not with thunder or spears. No, he came with drums, with tambourines, with wine and laughter, and people who danced like they were remembering how to be alive. You stop at a small stream. The god kneels and scoops water into his mouth with one hand, water running down his chin. You mimic him, and the coldness of it shocks you back into the present. He dries his hands on his robes, then says, "They didn't like what I brought, not at first." He's right, of course. The other gods preferred structure. Hymns with clean lines, offerings weighed precisely, followers who bowed in measured reverence. Dionysus brought something else, ecstasy, frenzy, the raw edge of emotion where joy and sorrow share the same breath. He didn't ask people to worship, he asked them to let go, and that terrified Olympus more than any army. You start walking again, mind buzzing. You get it now. Why he wasn't an easy fit. Why even now, thousands of years later, he feels like a puzzle piece carved from a different set. But you also see why people followed him anyway. Because life, for all its rules and ledgers, is still messy. And sometimes what you need isn't order, it's release. Dionysus leads you higher into the hills now, where the air grows sharper and carries the scent of rosemary and pine. The grass here is tougher, stubborn, clinging to thin soil between jagged rocks. You feel your legs aching, your lungs working harder, but he moves effortlessly, as if the earth is giving way for him. You pause for a breath. He turns, flashing that same fox's grin. "Careful," he says. "This is where the madness begins." You chuckle weakly, unsure whether he's joking. The madness. That was always the accusation, wasn't it? That Dionysus drove people mad. That he loosened their minds the way others loosen their belts after a feast. But it's never quite that simple. You crest a ridge and find a circle of standing stones, ancient, worn smooth by centuries of wind. Dionysus steps into the center. His voice drops. "They feared what I gave people, not because it broke them, but because it freed them." You walk the edge of the circle, fingers brushing each stone. They're warm, sun-kissed. You imagine others standing here long ago, under the same sky, chanting, laughing, howling at the stars. Mainstream fact, the cult of Dionysus, also known as the Dionysian Mysteries, was one of the most widespread and controversial in the ancient world. His rites were practiced in secret groves, hidden valleys, and torchlit caves across Greece and beyond. Participants, often women, often outcasts, would dance, drink, and enter trances. To outsiders, it looked like madness. To those within, it was something closer to salvation. You picture the Manids, the raving ones, women in ivy crowns and flowing robes, spinning in the moonlight. Sometimes they were mothers, farmers, priestesses. Sometimes they were simply tired of silence. Dionysus doesn't interrupt your imagining. He watches, head tilted slightly, as if listening to the echoes of ancient feet. They said they saw visions, he says softly. Heard the gods whisper, touched something real. You nod. You can see it. In a world where most people live tightly wound lives, their roles fixed from birth, Dionysus offered a moment of unbinding. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, even those that banned open Dionysian worship still kept a little statue of the god in a closet or cupboard, just in case. Officially, they rejected him. But privately, they hedged their bets. You sit on one of the stones now, dust puffing up around you. The sun slants sideways, casting long shadows through the circle. Dionysus paces. They called it chaos, he mutters. They always do when people stop obeying. You ask him what really happened during those rituals. Not the version whispered by senators or scribbled angrily by philosophers. He smirks. What happens when you give people space to feel everything they've been told to bury? The answer hangs in the air like incense. It wasn't just whine and shouting. It was grief, joy, anger, fear, desire. All the human parts of the self that daily life forced into silence. The Dionysian rites let them speak. Some would sing until their voices cracked. Some would dance until they collapsed. Some would weep over losses they never dared to name aloud. And some would see things, visions, symbols, dreams. Historians still argue whether these experiences were induced by substances, suggestion, or genuine spiritual ecstasy. The line between hallucination and revelation is a thin one, especially when the stars are spinning and the drums are loud. You lie back on the stone, looking up. The sky's bluer here, like someone turned up the saturation. Clouds drift slowly, aimless. You wonder what it would be like to dance like that, to let go so fully, to belong to something so wild it terrifies the powerful. Dionysus sits beside you now, robe rustling. He pulls something from the folds, a pomegranate, deep red, gleaming. He breaks it open, seeds glistening like jewels, and hands you half. You eat a few slowly. They burst between your teeth with a sharp, sweet tang. He watches you. No one wants to admit they need release, he says. They want to believe they're strong enough to carry everything. You chew quietly. But carrying it all, he continues, isn't the same as surviving it. The sun begins to dip lower. A breeze picks up, tugging gently at your sleeves. You imagine yourself in one of those rites, maybe with a painted face, bare feet, moving in rhythm with people you don't know but somehow trust. Not trying to impress anyone, not trying to fix anything, just being. It's strange how comforting the thought is. You look over at Dionysus, who's biting into a seed with a small, satisfied crunch. I don't want followers, he says finally. I want witnesses, people who remember what it's like to feel everything. He flicks a seed into the air. It arcs, lands in the dust. You watch it for a long time. Maybe it'll grow. The light fades as you follow Dionysus down from the stones, back toward the river where this strange evening began. There's a warmth still clinging to the rocks, but shadows stretch longer now, and the air turns honey thick with dusk. A pair of owls call back and forth in the distance, soft and uncertain, like they're checking in. You step carefully over a root, and Dionysus glances back. Still with me? He asks, raising an eyebrow. Barely, you think. Not from fatigue, but from drifting. Your mind already loosening like a wine-drenched rope, unraveling somewhere between memory and dream. He leads you along a narrow path between tall grasses. You can hear water now, bubbling lazily. The smell of wet earth and wild mint rises up. And then, just beyond a stand of crooked trees, you see it. A small, hidden spring. Shallow, yes, and choked with reeds, but the water gleams like polished bronze under the last streaks of sunlight. Dionysus kneels beside it, scooping some into his hand, letting it trickle between his fingers. "You ever hear about the Tyrrhenian pirates?" he says casually, like a parent telling a bedtime fable. You shake your head. "Well," he begins, "they picked the wrong god to kidnap." Mainstream fact: according to one of the more enduring myths, a band of pirates, Tyrrhenian by most accounts, once tried to abduct Dionysus. He was disguised as a beautiful mortal youth. The pirates, seeing only his soft robes and lack of weaponry, assumed he was a prince ripe for ransom. Dionysus doesn't seem offended as he recounts it. If anything, he looks amused. "They tied me up," he says, tugging playfully at an invisible rope around his wrists, or tried to. In most versions, the rope simply wouldn't hold. They fell off as if the knots forgot how to knot. One sailor noticed. The helmsman, usually. He tried to warn the others. "Don't do this," he begged. This is no ordinary boy. But pirates don't listen to reason. Not when gold's involved. You imagine the ship on that warm morning, oars slicing the waves, gulls wheeling overhead, and below deck, a boy too calm to be a prisoner. Dionysus sighs, stretching his arms. "So I showed them." The transformation came fast. First, the ship refused to obey. Vines sprang up from nowhere, coiling around the mast, twining through the oarlocks. Ivy crept across the sails like a silent storm. Then came the beasts, phantoms of panthers and wolves prowling the deck, their eyes golden and unblinking. The sailors panicked. Some jumped overboard, seeking escape in the open sea. They didn't drown, they changed. Quirky tidbit: in many tellings, Dionysus didn't just punish the pirates, he repurposed them. One by one, the swimmers twisted into sleek leaping shapes, dolphins, creatures that still follow ships today, some say, as a reminder. You crouch beside him now, staring into the spring. The surface ripples, reflecting the amber sky. "Why dolphins?" you ask. He shrugs. "Better than frogs," you smirk. "Fair. But maybe it wasn't punishment at all. Maybe it was mercy. Maybe he saw something in them, something worth saving, if not in the form they started with." Historians still argue whether the dolphin story was meant as a moral, a metaphor, or just an origin tale for why dolphins sometimes circle boats. Some link it to older sea deities, folded into Dionysus' mythos. Others think it was a cautionary tale for those who underestimated joy, who treated beauty as weakness. You sit back, feeling the cool earth under your palms. "It's strange," you murmur. "You could have sunk the ship, let them drown." Dionysus nods. "But I didn't." He glances at you. Everyone deserves a second shape. The wind rustles through the reeds. You wonder what it would be like to become something else. Not out of punishment, but possibility. To shed everything you've been told you are and swim, sleek and silver, through a wider world. The spring bubbles beside you. A dragonfly lands on your knee. Dionysus stands, brushing off his hands. "Come on," he says. "I'll show you something better than revenge." You rise, following. Somewhere overhead, a dolphin arcs in the fading light of your imagination. And you start to believe that maybe transformation isn't about losing yourself. Maybe it's about remembering what you were always capable of. The path climbs again, slow and winding, the soil packed firm under your sandals. As you follow Dionysus through the brush, a low hum drifts through the air, somewhere between a tune and the wind in hollow reeds. He's whistling, if you can call it that. Or maybe the trees are. The land opens slightly ahead, revealing an overgrown hill with wide, flat stones stacked like a forgotten altar. Dionysus gestures toward it without pausing, just a flick of the wrist. "That," he says, "was a theater once." You squint at it. "A theater?" "Not much to look at now," he admits, stepping onto the largest slab. "But there was a time when the whole hillside echoed with voices, laughter, grief, even those over-the-top sword-fighting monologues. He pantomimes a tragic death scene, clutching his chest, stumbling, falling dramatically onto the grass. You chuckle. It's ridiculous and kind of perfect. Mainstream fact, Dionysus was more than just the god of wine and wild nights. He was also the god of theater. In ancient Athens, dramatic festivals like the Dionysia were held in his honor, blending civic pride, religious fervor, and a surprising amount of fart jokes. Actors, Dionysus says now, hopping back down, are just priests with better costumes. You blink, he winks. Don't tell the priests I said that. The two of you continue across the clearing, the ghost of applause rustling the leaves above. You half expect a chorus in masks to leap from behind a bush and start narrating your life in rhyming couplets. But instead, Dionysus turns thoughtful. You know, he says, mortals always think theater is about pretending, but really it's about remembering. He pauses, crouching to trace a shape into the dust. A simple mask, one half smiling, the other frowning. Joy, sorrow, laughter, fear, they live closer than people think. Quirky tidbit, in some rare depictions, Dionysus isn't just the patron of drama, he's the mask itself. The literal face worn during performances. A god not as observer but as medium. Each role, each line spoken is another sip from his cup. You sit beside him, legs crossed, and stare at the fading sky. You ever act? He asks. Only badly, you admit. Well, that's still acting. He tosses you a stick like a scepter. Try being a god, he says. You raise the stick. Kneel, mortals. The woods remain unimpressed. Still, you both laugh. There's something calming about the idea that even the serious stuff, the crying, the fear, the heartbreak, was once performed on stage, framed in poetic music and well-timed exits. Historians still argue whether the first plays were reenactments of Dionysian rites or merely civic pageants. Dionysus adds, plucking a sprig of rosemary from the ground. But honestly, does it matter? He twirls the herb between his fingers. They remembered, they gathered, they felt something together. That's enough. You lean back against a stone and let your eyes wander upward. Stars begin to blink through the indigo haze. One falls too fast for a wish. Dionysus settles beside you, quiet for a while. You notice how still the night has become. No distant barking, no buzz of insects, just the breath of the land and your own heartbeat in your ears. Tell me something, you say. Do you miss it? He looks over. The applause, the attention, the shrines. He thinks for a long time before answering. Sometimes, he admits, but it's like wine, best savored, not gulped. You nod. That tracks. Theater, after all, was never meant to be permanent. Costumes fray, props fall apart, scripts get forgotten. But the feelings, those linger. You sigh, letting your head tilt to one side, resting on your arm. The rock is surprisingly warm, still clinging to the last of the sun. Tomorrow, you mumble, I have to scrub floors. Dionysus chuckles softly. Then make it a performance. You smile. Give the mop a name. Bow to the broom. Let the dust be drama. You laugh again. He's teasing, probably, but maybe he's not. The mask is still drawn in the dust at your feet. The sky deepens, the wind picks up, gentle as breath through a reed pipe. You close your eyes. Theater, pirates, dolphins, wine. All part of the same story now, all part of you. You wake to the smell of figs. Not just ripe figs, but overripe, soft and syrupy, heavy on the air like summer secrets. Dionysus is already ahead of you, half climbing, half lounging in the crooked arms of a gnarled fig tree. Morning, he calls, as if the stars hadn't just blinked out and you hadn't been asleep for, well, you're not sure how long. A fig hits the ground beside you with a wet thump. You stretch, joints popping, and glance up at him. I thought you were more of a grape guy. He bites into a fig, juice streaking his chin. Figs came first, he says. Long before vineyards. They're older, wilder, trickier. Mainstream fact, before wine culture took root in Greece, the fig was one of the oldest cultivated crops, used for food, medicine, and even fermented drinks long before organized viticulture. The Greeks honored Demeter and Dionysus with offerings of dried figs in early festivals. Besides, Dionysus adds, flicking a pit into the brush, you don't really eat a fig. You surrender to it. You stare up at him, baffled and mildly concerned, as he tears another fruit in half with theatrical flair. Okay, you say. That sounds like something you told pirates before turning them into dolphins. He laughs, one of those long, belly-deep ones that makes birds fly from the trees. You climb up onto a low branch and sit, sticky leaves brushing your knees. Tell me about that, you say. The pirates. He dangles a fig at you. You already know the story. Sure, but I want your version. He chews thoughtfully, then begins. There I was, all alone on the shore, just a pretty youth in a cloak too fine for the likes of me. That's bait, you know. Beauty. It's always bait. You nod. Unfortunately true. They saw me, thought I was a prince, maybe worth a ransom, scooped me up like gulls after bread. He plucks another fig, squeezes it until the juice runs. They tied me up, laughed, called me soft. His smile sharpens, but the sea knew me. The mass sprouted vines, ivy curled through their ropes. A tiger appeared, don't ask how, it's a long story, and the crew, bless them, leapt into the waves like panicked cats. Quirky tidbit, ancient mariners often carved dolphins onto their ships for luck, protection, or guidance. The story of Dionysus turning pirates into dolphins became a popular way to explain this imagery, as if each carving honored a former brigand now doomed to graceful aquatic repentance. They swam away, tails flipping, probably still out there, somewhere, herding tuna, gossiping with whales. You blink. Do dolphins gossip? Endlessly, Dionysus says. They're worse than nymphs. A breeze shifts through the fig branches. The scent thickens, almost too sweet now, cloying. You wipe your hands on your tunic and glance toward the distant shimmer of the sea. So, that was punishment? He tilts his head. Or mercy, he says. Depends how you look at it. You both sit quietly for a moment. Historians still argue whether this myth was a warning about kidnapping strangers or a coded tale of maritime rituals tied to Dionysian cults, you say, half remembering a dusty lecture hall and a professor who smelled like chalk and olives. Dionysus stretches, arms overhead. Maybe it was just a reminder. Don't mess with gods in disguise. Fair enough. The tree groans beneath your weight as you climb down. Dionysus drops beside you, barefoot and unhurried. Fig trees, he says, are like memory. Messy, sticky, but sweet if you don't fight them. You walk in silence for a while, wiping juice from your fingers on the grass. You think about the pirates, wide-eyed and laughing until they realize who they'd taken. You think about the moment before the mast bloomed, when they still thought they were in control. It's a strange comfort in a way, that the gods have stories too, that even immortals remember being underestimated. A rustle behind you. Dionysus has paused, crouched low. What is it? You ask. He holds up a hand, finger to lips. You crouch beside him. Ahead, a snake moves slowly across the path. Long, green-brown, sun-warmed and silent. It doesn't see you. Or maybe it does, and just doesn't care. You both watch it disappear into the brush. That, he says softly, was one of mine. You stare at him. Wait, what? Snakes, he says, brushing his hands off. They were sacred to me once. Symbols of rebirth, mystery. They shed what doesn't serve them. Mainstream fact, in some Dionysian cult rituals, snakes were used during ecstatic dances or processions, believed to represent divine power or communion with the beyond. Participants would let serpents crawl over them to demonstrate trust in the god. You walk on, your pace slower now, more careful. The day stretches golden and strange, each moment braided with myth every breeze like the echo of a song half forgotten. You glance sideways at your companion. Do you miss them? You ask. The pirates? No, the ones who used to worship you, with torches and chants and all that. He smiles, sad this time. Sometimes, he says, but the figs still grow. The stories still move. You nod, and under your breath, you hum the old tune again, your mother's tune. This time, Dionysus joins in, off-key, of course. You're not sure how long you've been walking, but the trees are thinning now. The ground grows rockier, flatter, and there's a faint hint of salt in the air. Maybe the sea, maybe the memory of it. Dionysus moves ahead of you, cloak dragging behind him, hair tangled with fig leaves and tiny bits of bark. He hums under his breath some half-drunk, half-divine melody that loops without logic. It sticks in your brain like burrs on your tunic. So, you say, how exactly did you get a seat on Olympus? He laughs through his nose. Now that, he says, was a party. You wait. And a tragedy, he adds more quietly, like most of my stories. You follow him to a low stone outcrop where you both sit, legs dangling. Below, a narrow path winds down to a shimmering body of water, small, still, and the color of forgotten dreams. Dionysus flicks a pebble into the water. I wasn't always one of them, you know, he says. The Olympians. You nod. That much you remember, how he wandered the earth, how his mother Semele died before he was born. Or maybe during birth, or maybe right after. As usual, the myths disagree. Mainstream fact, Dionysus is the only Olympian whose mother was mortal. Semele, a Theban princess who died after seeing Zeus in his true divine form. To save the unborn child, Zeus sewed Dionysus into his thigh until he was ready to be born. Yes, his thigh. Divine parenting is unconventional. It was a political nightmare, Dionysus says, reaching into a pouch and pulling out what might be dried dates. Nepotism, chaos, and I showed up with an entourage of satyrs and drunken goat dancers. You can imagine the welcome. You can, actually. It involves Zeus pretending he knows what's going on, Hera shooting daggers from her eyes, and Apollo politely but firmly asking you not to touch anything. But I earned it, he continues. Earned that seat. I brought something the others couldn't. What? Wine? He snorts. Freedom, madness, ecstasy, the gift of letting go. Even gods need that sometimes. You chew on that thought, watching ripples fan across the water. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient inscriptions refer to Dionysus not just as a god of wine and revelry, but also as a liberator, Eleutherios, the one who breaks chains. His cult offered more than drunken parties. It was one of the few religious spaces where women, slaves, and outsiders could participate equally. But not everyone liked that idea, Dionysus says. Not everyone liked me. You glance at him. His tone has sharpened just slightly. The shadows under his eyes look deeper. Hera? Oh, especially Hera, he says. She never forgave Zeus for Semele. Historians still argue whether Hera's persecution of Dionysus reflects older local resistance to his cult, you mutter, or just regular Olympian family drama. Can it be both? He grins. Fair point. So what did you do, you ask? To earn your seat? He looks out over the water. His voice drops. I went mad. I went everywhere. I lost myself. Then I came back. And that's the thing about Dionysus. His stories are always looping, fragmented, nonlinear. He is not a god of logic or order. He's the god of losing your mind on purpose and finding yourself somewhere stranger, deeper, older. The wind kicks up. You shiver. They say I was torn apart, he adds softly. By titans, by rage, by madness. But I came back. Mainstream fact. One strand of Dionysian myth suggests he was once dismembered by the titans and later resurrected. A motif scholars connect to seasonal cycles, agricultural myths, and other dying and rising gods across ancient cultures. He turns to you. Ever been torn apart? You blink. Well, emotionally. Then you know, he says, that coming back is the hard part. Silence stretches between you like cooling wax. Then, without warning, Dionysus stands, dusts himself off, and says, "Race you to the bottom." What? But he's already bounding down the path like a mountain goat on espresso. You scramble after him, nearly twisting your ankle on a loose stone. The descent is wild and fast, your lungs burning, sandals skidding on gravel. He reaches the bottom first, of course, arms raised in triumph. God of parties and speed, he declares. You collapse beside him, panting. The small lake, or maybe it's a hidden inlet, is clearer up close. You can see tiny fish darting below the surface. A frog croaks from somewhere nearby. Dionysus removes his sandals and steps into the shallows. It's colder than it looks, he warns. You follow up to your ankles. He's right. It bites. Do the other gods ever come here, you ask? Not often, he says, too quiet. You wade out beside him, water lapping at your calves. So this is your retreat? He nods. One of many. You look down and see your reflection, but it shifts. Your face becomes older, younger, stranger. Not frightening, just unfamiliar. Is that supposed to happen? He shrugs. Water plays tricks. The sun slants low, painting the surface gold. Your shadow stretches beside his, long-limbed, mythic, a silhouette of someone who's been places. He splashes you suddenly, grinning. You splash him back. A brief, ridiculous moment. Gods can be petty too. Eventually, you both sit on the shore, drying in the last warmth of the day. Dionysus hums again, that looping melody. You join in. Maybe it's a hymn, maybe it's nonsense, doesn't matter. You're not sure you've ever felt quite so tired in your bones, or quite so safe. The stars are already blinking awake by the time Dionysus leads you away from the shore. Your feet are still damp, and your tunic clings to your skin in strange places, but you follow him anyway, back into the tangle of brush and stone and faintly humming insects. He hums too, of course, always humming, like his bones are made of music. I think it's time, he says, that I told you about the pirates. You raise an eyebrow. What pirates? Oh, you'll love this one, he says, eyes gleaming in the starlight. It starts with hubris and ends with flippers. You don't know where he's leading you. There's no clear path now, but your feet trust him, even if your brain isn't so sure. So, he begins, I was walking, just walking, minding my own divine business in the form of a beautiful mortal youth, because sometimes it's fun to go incognito. Of course it is. I was somewhere near the coast, the Aegean. Hot day, smelled like olives and salt and bad decisions. And then this crew of pirates, Tyrrhenians, maybe Etruscans, nobody agrees, spots me and decides, hey, that's a rich kid. Let's grab him and sell him for ransom. Mainstream fact. One of the most famous myths about Dionysus tells how he was kidnapped by pirates who didn't realize he was a god. Ancient vase paintings and Homeric hymns preserve this story, showing Dionysus as a serene figure while chaos erupts around him. So they tie me up, Dionysus continues, but surprise, ropes don't work on gods. And they didn't notice? You ask. He grins. Not at first. I let them get a little distance. Let them dream about all the gold they'd buy. Maybe a nice slave market visit. A few new sandals. You wince. Charming bunch. Oh, very. But then things got weird. Weird how? First, the ship stops moving. No wind, no waves. Just dead still. You picture it. Pirates looking around, scratching their heads, trying to row. Nothing. Then vines, grapevines, sprouting from the mast, wrapping around the oars, coiling like snakes. Quirky tidbit. Some versions of the myth say that wine began to spill spontaneously from the ship's planks, flooding the deck in sweet, sticky rivers. Other versions add wild animals, lions or panthers, appearing out of thin air. And then, Dionysus says with a chuckle, I turned into a lion. You blink. You what? A lion. Big, golden, roaring, right there on the deck. They screamed like goats. He's clearly delighted by this part. You try to imagine it. Sailors flailing, grapevines snaking up their arms, wine gushing from the wood, and then bam! Lion God. Historians still argue whether the Tyrrhenian pirate myth reflects actual maritime superstitions or just serves as a warning not to mess with strangers, you mutter, because you like pretending this is a lecture, not a dream. Dionysus grins again. Either way, they jumped overboard. Every single one of them. And you let them drown? Not quite. I turned them into dolphins. You stop walking. Wait, those dolphins? The same. You glance up at the night sky, wondering how many dolphins you've unknowingly waved at, never realizing they were once failed kidnappers. I thought it was poetic, he says. Dolphins still follow ships, still try to help humans, like they're working off a debt. They remember something, even if they don't know what. There's a hush around you now. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the two of you and the memory of the sea. You sit down on a rock. Your legs are tired, but your brain is spinning. So you punished them, but also gave them a new purpose? Dionysus shrugs. That's kind of my thing. Transformation. I don't destroy. I change. You don't have to be what you were. You nod slowly. There's something oddly comforting in that. Even pirates can get a second act. Of course, he adds, not everyone gets dolphins. Some just get headaches. You laugh. It's too loud for the silence, but it feels good. Were you always this theatrical? I am the god of theater, he says, bowing extravagantly. Masks, roles, illusions, those are my domain too. Mainstream fact, Dionysus was deeply associated with Greek theater. The earliest tragedies were performed during festivals in his honor, like the city Dionysia in Athens. Masks, costumes, and dramatic transformation were seen as spiritual experiences, not just entertainment. Let's walk, he says. It's a long night yet. You rise, stretching sore muscles, and follow. Did the pirates ever thank you, you ask, for turning them into marine mammals? Can't say they sent flowers. He stops suddenly, raising a hand. You freeze. What is it? He points ahead. And there, in a small moonlit clearing, is a fountain. Stone and moss covered, its water trickles into a shallow basin. And a cup rests on the edge. Drink, Dionysus says. You hesitate. What is it? Spring of forgetfulness, he says. Just sip, clears out the noise, helps you sleep. You pick up the cup, it's cool in your hand, heavier than it looks. You first, he smiles. Doesn't work on me, I'm already lost. You laugh again, softer this time, and sip. It tastes like cold rain and silence, and something inside you softens, not gone, just quiet. The stars seem closer now. Your body feels lighter. Not sleepy, not exactly, just less tense, like some part of your soul untied its sandals and sat down. You pass the cup back. Good, Dionysus says. Now let's go talk to a goat. You blink. A what? But he's already walking. Of course he is. You follow, because what else are you going to do? You trail after Dionysus through the moon-silvered underbrush, your feet barely making a sound now. The quiet has settled around you like a second cloak, loose, comforting, and heavy with dreams. He said something about a goat. You're not sure if that was a joke or a divine detour. Spoiler, it's not a joke. You crest a small hill, pushing aside a curtain of olive branches, and there it is, a goat. But not just any goat. This one's huge, broad-chested, horns like twin spirals of bone, golden fleece glinting under the moonlight. And for some reason, it's standing atop a low stone altar like a philosopher waiting for applause. You blink. That's not normal. Nothing about me ever is, Dionysus says, climbing up next to the goat like this is totally routine. Meet a Malthea, he adds. Or, well, the idea of her. She's more metaphor these days than mammal. Mainstream fact, in Greek mythology, Amalthea was the divine goat who nursed infant Zeus with her milk while he was hidden away on Crete. In some versions, she's a goat. In others, a nymph who owns the goat. Her broken horn became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty. She took care of Zeus when he was just a squealing thunder baby, Dionysus says, petting her golden flank. I thought it was only fair to visit every now and then. The goat bleats once, deeply, like a sound echoing from the underworld. Still remembers me, he whispers. Does she remember everything? You ask, leaning forward. Dionysus looks up at you, brow furrowed. More than you think. That's the thing with immortals. They don't forget, they just bury. You sit on a flat stone nearby, staring at the goat. She's not chewing, just watching, eyes like polished brass, ancient and too calm. So why the goat tonight, you ask? Because we're not done with transformation, he says. Not yet, not by a long shot. You sigh. Great. You ever heard of the Maenads? He asks. You have, vaguely. Drunken women, wild dancers, dangerous. You should meet them, he says. Not tonight, he adds quickly, seeing your eyes widen. You'd get ripped apart. Comforting. Quirky tidbit. Ancient accounts of Maenads, female followers of Dionysus, include stories of them dancing in trance-like states, drinking wine, wearing animal skins, and in some cases tearing animals, and occasionally men, limb from limb. Some historians think these tales were exaggerated. Others aren't so sure. They're misunderstood, Dionysus continues. People hear crazy drunk women and think chaos, but really, they're just letting go, tapping into something primal, something beyond words. You nod slowly. It tracks. The goat snorts again, stamping one hoof like punctuation. There's power in surrender, he says, in forgetting who you're supposed to be. The Maenads knew that. They became something else, not weaker, not out of control, just true. You lean back against a tree. Your head is heavy now. The spring water, the story, all of it blends into a soft rhythm in your chest. But there's danger too, he says. Not everyone survives freedom. You can dissolve yourself if you're not careful. Historians still argue whether the cult of Dionysus was a liberating religious movement or a threat to Greek social order, you murmur, almost by reflex. Dionysus laughs. They're both right. That's the fun part. The goat, Amalthea, idea or not, bows her head slightly, like she's finished her shift on the cosmic stage. You wonder what it's like to nurse gods, raise chaos, and then retire to some dream world pasture. Let's move, Dionysus says. There's a clearing up ahead, and I think you're due for some music. You raise an eyebrow. You're going to serenade me? He laughs. You should be so lucky. No, I've got a friend waiting. He's the real deal. The trees begin to thin as you walk again. The air smells faintly of myrrh and old wine. And then you hear it, the slow, low notes of a pan flute, just 3 or 4 notes repeating, soft, haunting, ancient. In the clearing ahead, a figure sits on a stump, goat legs, human torso, curved horns, a shaggy beard, and an expression like he's always slightly unimpressed. Pan, the god of shepherds, wild groves, and sudden fear. Mainstream fact, Pan was a rustic god, half man, half goat, associated with wild nature, fertility, and music. His name is the root of the word panic, as it was believed he could instill sudden terror in people who entered his domain uninvited. He glances up as you enter. About time, he says in a voice like crunching leaves and creek stones. This one's tired, Dionysus says, motioning to you. Thought you could play them down. Pan nods once and raises the flute again. The music returns, cyclical, slow, curving like smoke in your ears. You used to run from this sound, Dionysus whispers beside you. Now it makes you sleepy. You blink. Your legs fold underneath you without thought. The ground is mossy and warm. The night has no edges anymore. Just sound and stars, and that lingering feeling of being almost someone else. What's the song about, you ask, your words thick and drifting? Loss, Pan replies, and joy, and chasing things that never stop running. The flute rises again. Dionysus crouches beside you, brushing something from your shoulder. Not all transformations are loud, he says. Some are just letting go. You nod, or maybe just breathe, and the music goes on. The night has fully opened now. Black velvet stretched across the sky, dotted with stars, so still you wonder if they're watching. You're not sure when you last blinked. Pan plays on, each note winding around your thoughts like ivy. Somewhere between one breath and the next, Dionysus has shifted his posture, lounging like a bored cat on a patch of lichen. His expression is unreadable, half smile, half melancholy. And then the music stops. Pan lowers the flute and says nothing, which somehow feels more final than any bow or goodbye. You rise slowly like your bones are full of syrup. Dionysus stands too, brushing dust from his sleeves. Right, he mutters. Time for the sea. The sea, you echo, though your voice is barely yours anymore. Oh yes, he says. Big blue, lots of splashy death. You'll love it. And you're walking again, downhill this time, through narrow paths and dew-soaked grasses that sparkle in moonlight. In the distance, you hear gulls, nocturnal, echoing like lost laughter. Eventually, the trail opens onto a cliffside. Below, black waves churning around jagged rocks. Dionysus doesn't stop walking. He just keeps moving, right to the edge. You follow, of course. You remember the pirates? He asks casually, as if he's mentioning a lunch date. You nod. The ones you turned into dolphins. Mainstream fact. According to myth, Dionysus once boarded a ship of Tyrrhenian pirates who, not recognizing him as a god, tried to kidnap him. He transformed the mast into serpents, filled the ship with ivy and music, and then turned the terrified crew into dolphins. It's one of his most famous divine flexes. Well, he says, that wasn't the whole story. You peer over the edge. Waves slap the rock like angry applause. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant to explain the origin of dolphins or to serve as a warning about hubris, Dionysus adds, smirking. Then he points. You squint into the dark, and there, just past the surf figures leap and twist through the water. Sleek, fast flickers of silver under moonlight. They've been out there ever since, he murmurs, swimming, remembering. You stare heart hollow. Is it punishment, you ask? He shrugs. Maybe. Maybe it's a gift. Who wouldn't want to live forever as a dolphin? No taxes, no heartbreak, just endless dives. Quirky tidbit. Some versions of the myth say Dionysus gave the pirates new life as dolphins so they could spend eternity helping lost sailors, almost like celestial lifeguards. Other versions claim he did it purely out of spite, laughing as they flopped into the sea. It's like I told you, Dionysus says. Transformation isn't always a curse. Sometimes it's just the next shape. The wind tugs at your hair. You sit, knees pulled to your chest, and listen to the ocean breathe. How did they not know you were a god, you ask? Didn't you do glowy stuff? He chuckles. I was in disguise. You'd be amazed how often people ignore the divine when it's dressed like a hitchhiker. You glance over. That's terrifying. Exactly. He sits next to you, not close but not far. There's a lesson in it, he adds. You never know when your moment is coming. One day you're steering a ship, next day you're flipper deep in Poseidon's jacuzzi. You laugh, surprised. It feels good, like salt on the tongue. Did they deserve it, you ask, softer now. Dionysus doesn't answer right away. Then they made a choice. They saw something strange, something beautiful, and they chose fear. You nod slowly. That's it, the theme, the thread. Dionysus turns towards you. Go on. You make people choose, control or surrender, fear or curiosity, wine or sobriety. He beams. Now you're getting it. The dolphins leap again, synchronized like dancers. You swear you hear laughter in the splash. What would you have done, you ask, if you were them? I was them, he says. Once. And suddenly the sea seems deeper, not with water, with memory. Dionysus stands and stretches. Come on, he says, let's go meet the sky. You follow, climbing back from the edge, your heartbeat syncing with the waves behind you. Soon the grass returns, the trees, the hush of branches swaying. It's quieter now, like the night is folding in on itself. Your legs move on habit, your thoughts begin to fog, and then you see it. A hill, round-topped, smooth, with a single wooden chair set atop it facing the sky. Dionysus gestures for you to sit. You do, and above you stars begin to drift. Not fall, drift, like petals in a pond. You've earned a rest, he whispers. You look up at him. Are we done? He smiles. Not quite a yes, not quite a no. You've walked a long road, he says. You've met gods and goats and grieving sea creatures. You've tasted what it is to dissolve. You blink slowly. The chair is warm beneath you. And now? You ask. Now, he says, you do the hardest thing of all. You close your eyes. What's that? He leans close. You sleep. It begins as stillness. At first, you think you're floating, but no, you're seated, cradled by the curved wood of that impossible chair, its back angled just enough to let your head tip into the stars. Dionysus is gone. Or maybe not gone, just dissolved again, into vine and bark, into mist and memory, into that same place he's always lived, somewhere between real and unreal. The chair's still warm, though, like he left just seconds ago. You draw in a breath. It tastes of fennel and sea salt. The sky is ink but alive. Constellations glimmer, ancient and accidental. You recognize Orion's belt, then the soft shimmer of Lyra. The myths above you glow like soft candlelight, so many stories stitched across the night. Why dolphins, you murmur, though no one's there to answer. Maybe it's a metaphor. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe it was just Dionysus being Dionysus. Mainstream historical fact, dolphins held a sacred place in many Greek tales, often seen as good omens or saviors of sailors. Ancient Greeks even told stories of them carrying souls to the afterlife or guiding ships to safety. For a civilization obsessed with the sea, dolphins were less animal and more divine courier. Below the hill, waves hush against rock. Wind calms the trees with gentle fingers. The entire world feels like it's exhaling, like you're the only person awake in a sleeping museum. And then you remember the theater. Not a real one, though yes, Dionysus had those too, but the metaphorical kind. The world is stage, people playing parts, pirates pretending to be bold, mortals pretending they know what gods want. And you've just watched a whole play unfold. The prologue was a wine god in disguise. The conflict was a choice, mercy or mockery. The climax, a splash and a transformation. The dolphins twirling under moonlight, that was the curtain call. Quirky tidbit. In one lesser-known version of the myth, the pirates weren't punished at all. They leapt into the sea willingly, caught up in Dionysus' ecstatic energy, transformed by joy rather than judgment. In that telling, it wasn't revenge, it was transcendence. Historians still argue whether the dolphin myth was intended as literal caution or as an abstract metaphor for change. Was it about punishment, salvation, or simply the madness of being near divinity? You let the question drift away like a paper boat on water. Above, a shooting star slices the darkness. Fast, fleeting, beautiful. You wonder if the dolphins see it too. From far away, you hear a low hum, maybe music, maybe waves, maybe your own pulse. It's steady, comforting, like the thrum of a heart under warm skin. And then something peculiar happens. You start to forget. Not all at once, but gently, like sand falling through fingers. You forget how long you've been walking. You forget how the wine tasted. You forget the names of islands, the shape of a goat's grin, the weight of ivy on your shoulders. It doesn't worry you. It feels like rest. The chair tilts back just a little more. Your eyelids flutter, barely open now. The stars swirl in your periphery, then blur into a soft silvery fog. The world you realize is quiet, and you are quieter still. You remember one last thing before the final hush. Dolphins leaping, sleek and silver, in the wake of a divine joke. And then, just like that, you let go. Wind down. Now let it all fade. Let the myth soften into watercolor shapes behind your eyes. Let Dionysus wander off into your subconscious, barefoot and humming, taking his ivy and madness with him. You've followed a trail through ancient woods and even older stories. You've watched gods disguise themselves, mortals stumble into their own legends, and sea creatures ripple through moonlight. You've met joy and terror and transformation, each curled inside the other like nesting dolls. But now there's nothing left to chase, nothing left to prove, only breath and quiet. The stars above your closed eyes continue their slow arc across the sky. The chair beneath you holds you steady, as if built by time itself, and the wind hums like a lullaby written in another language, long before your first thought. You don't need to understand everything. You've already journeyed far beyond where stories usually end. Here, in this place between wake and sleep, you're not a listener anymore. You're a ripple, a thread in the myth, a shape caught mid-leap in the silver surf. So let your muscles go soft. Let your mind unravel. Let the dolphins dive once more, out there in the black water, carrying pieces of old pirate souls and new dreams into the deep. You're safe. You're drifting. And the world is still.